I'm writing this not for sympathy or validation, but because maybe someone else facing what I faced might find some clarity through my experience. After nearly 4 years of marriage, I discovered my wife's infidelity in January 2019. That discovery led me to the mountains, to solitude, and eventually to peace. I met Vanessa during a charity fundraiser hosted by a colleague from work. She stood out immediately, confident, articulate, with a sharp wit that caught my attention from across the room. When we started talking, I was drawn to her ambition and intelligence. She seemed equally captivated by my straightforward nature and what she called my refreshing honesty. Before we continue with today's story, if you're enjoying what you've heard so far, please hit that subscribe button. Every new subscriber helps me keep sharing these inspiring tales that touch your day. Thank you for your support. Our courtship was intense and passionate. Every time we met at each other's places, there was an immediate chemistry that made clothes seem like unnecessary barriers. After dating for about a year and a half, we married in a small ceremony and moved into a spacious downtown apartment while saving for our dream home. My job as an engineering consultant required occasional travel, usually short stints of 3 to 4 days every month or so. Vanessa worked as an executive for a marketing firm, a position that came with considerable prestige and an impressive salary. For the first 3 years, we seemed to have found the perfect balance. Looking back, I can pinpoint when things began to change. Small arguments erupted over inconsequential matters. When I mentioned her increasingly late hours and frequent team dinners, she became defensive. "I'm climbing the corporate ladder, Nathan," she would snap. "These networking events are part of the game. Besides, you're gone for days at a time. You have no right to question my schedule." The truth was, my trips were infrequent and brief, nothing like the picture she painted. I even offered to reduce my travel further, but our discussions always circled back to the same impasse. These arguments never reached a resolution, just temporary, uneasy truces. I was completely blind to what was happening. Apart from our dwindling intimacy and her late nights, there were no obvious signs. I rationalized her constant rejections when I initiated physical affection, telling myself she was simply exhausted from her demanding job. But each rejection chipped away at my self-esteem. She didn't exhibit the secretive texting I'd read about in articles on infidelity. She had converted our second bedroom into a home office where she spent considerable time, but that seemed normal given her position. By October 2018, Vanessa began coming home later, citing work commitments. What started as one evening a week soon became 3 or 4. While I've never considered myself jealous by nature, I knew her industry was male-dominated, and she interacted with numerous executives daily. Still, she maintained that her focus was solely on advancing her career. The first time I truly suspected something was about a month before everything unraveled. She had stopped at the grocery store on her way home and asked for help bringing in the bags. As I reached into the back seat, I noticed something silky peeking out from under the passenger seat, a scarf of hers. Not just any scarf, but one she typically wore when she dressed up for special occasions. That scarf made me physically ill in a way I couldn't explain. Vanessa always removed it with a particular flourish when she was feeling amorous. Finding it half hidden in her car triggered an instinctive dread. Why would her scarf be under the seat? I said nothing. My heart hammered so violently in my chest that when I brought the groceries inside, Vanessa asked, "Are you okay? You look like you've seen a ghost." I brushed off her comment. It took every ounce of self-control to mask my suspicions, to appear neither hurt nor foolish. That night, and the following day, I began to catalog potential signs I might have missed. Beyond the scarf, I had no concrete evidence. One Wednesday evening, I decided to make a special effort. I prepared an elaborate dinner, her favorite roasted salmon with dill sauce, arranged the table with our best dinnerware, bought fresh flowers, and selected a bottle of the Pinot Noir we'd discovered during our honeymoon. When Vanessa arrived home at her usual time, I proudly showed her everything I'd prepared. She responded with an apologetic smile. "I'm sorry, Nathan, but I have to meet colleagues at Riverside Lounge tonight," she said. "I need to shower first, but I can have a quick bite with you before leaving." Something inside me went completely quiet. The anger and hurt were so intense that I couldn't speak. While she showered, I slipped my work phone into her purse. Then I returned to the kitchen and methodically discarded the meal and flowers. When she emerged, looking stunning as always, she said, "All right, let's eat." "Never mind. Go meet your colleagues," I replied flatly. She gave me a puzzled look. "Are you upset?" "I'm disappointed that you never want to spend time with me anymore," I said. She became indignant, her voice taking on that condescending tone I'd grown to hate. "Don't be so sensitive, Nathan. Stop acting like a child." Silly me, I said, the realization of our situation crystallizing in that moment. I thought for once we could spend an evening together. She just rolled her eyes and stormed out. Once she left, I activated the tracking app for my work phone. 20 minutes later, it showed her stopping at the Riverside Lounge. I drove there and parked across the street, feeling like I'd entered some surreal alternate reality where I was now a person who spied on his wife. But I needed to know. An hour later, I watched as Vanessa exited the lounge with a man I recognized as a senior executive from her company. He pulled her close and kissed her, not a friendly peck, but an intimate gesture between lovers. My entire body went numb, my stomach clenching so tight I thought I might be sick. They got into his car and drove to a hotel about 10 minutes away. I followed at a distance, watching as they entered the lobby hand in hand. I'd seen enough. I pounded the steering wheel until my hands hurt. Then something inside me simply shut down. I can't describe it any other way, like some essential circuit had been switched off. I drove out of the city, replaying everything I'd witnessed. Tears of anger burned my eyes, but I kept driving until I found myself about 30 miles out of town at a roadside tavern with a weathered sign and gravel parking lot. I sat at the bar and ordered whiskey. The bartender, a woman in her 40s with kind eyes, commented, "You look like you've been through the ringer, honey." "You could say that," I replied with a half-hearted smile. A man in worn jeans and a flannel shirt sat down beside me and struck up a conversation. Despite my mood, something about his straightforward manner drew me out. Before long, I was telling him about Vanessa's betrayal and how all I wanted was to escape, to forget her completely. "You're not alone in this, friend," he said, giving me a knowing look. "Been there myself a few years back. There's a reason these things happen. Your life can go in good directions or bad from here. It's entirely up to you." His words cut through my fog of despair. Through the pain, I recognized the truth in what he said. We introduced ourselves. His name was Jack, a rugged, salt-of-the-earth type whose simplicity I found refreshing. "What's your next move?" he asked. "I haven't thought that far ahead," I admitted. "I just know I can't be around her anymore." Jack nodded thoughtfully. "I might have a solution. I've got a small cabin on my property that's sitting empty. Needs some work, but it's livable. It's in the foothills, about an hour from here. I could use someone to keep an eye on the place, and you could use somewhere to clear your head. Minimal rent." I stared at him, processing the offer. "Best advice I ever got," added the bartender, who'd been listening. "If I could have escaped my mess of an ex-husband years ago, I'd have jumped at the chance to live in a cabin in the mountains. Sometimes you need space to get your head straight." It felt surreal, like I'd stepped into someone else's story. But maybe this was exactly what I needed. "I'll think about it," I told Jack. "Maybe come take a look." We exchanged contact information and planned to meet at his property in a few days. For the first time since seeing Vanessa with that man, I felt a glimmer of possibility, a way out of what seemed like an inescapable nightmare. I've always found infidelity reprehensible, a line I knew I could never forgive once crossed. As I drove home that night, one thing became crystal clear. I would never again share my life with Vanessa. I arrived home after Vanessa and found her sitting on the sofa in her sleepwear, scrolling through her phone. She looked up with practiced nonchalance. "Where have you been?" she asked. I turned the question back on her. "Where have you been?" "Out for drinks with the team, like I said," she replied smoothly. I looked directly into her eyes. "Are you having an affair?" She appeared momentarily startled but recovered quickly. "No, of course not." "Why would you ask that?" "I heard rumors about you seeing someone at work," I said, keeping my actual knowledge to myself. "Who told you that?" she demanded. "Someone who knows," I replied vaguely. She scoffed. "You're being ridiculous." Then she deflected, accusing me of drinking too much and acting paranoid. She asked again where I'd been. "At a bar, having drinks with some friends," I said simply. Though she clearly wanted to interrogate me further, she retreated to our bedroom and went to sleep. With irrefutable proof of her deception fresh in my mind, I opted for the couch. Sleep eluded me as images of her with that man invaded my thoughts. I felt disgust, both with her and myself. But then I remembered Jack's cabin, and something like hope flickered to life. It was almost laughable how quickly my fight-or-flight response had activated, and how decisively I'd chosen flight. The next morning, we barely spoke, proceeding through our weekend as if nothing had happened. I met with Jack a few days later and was pleasantly surprised by what I found. His property was beautiful, 20 acres of forested land in the foothills. The cabin was basic but comfortable, about 500 square feet with surprising charm. It needed work, but I found myself excited by the prospect of fixing it up. Jack accepted my first month's payment, though he practically gave the place away. He showed me the larger property, including hiking trails and a small stream. His main house perched on a ridge overlooking everything, with utilities available for the cabin. Jack offered to help get the cabin ready, and I gratefully accepted. Over the next few weeks, I tried repeatedly to get Vanessa to confess, but she doubled down on her denial. I even told her directly, "If I find out you're cheating, there's no coming back from that." This only seemed to deepen her commitment to the lie, and she became more adamant in her denials. I almost laughed at the absurdity of it. Rather than confront her with what I knew, I quietly began preparing my exit. While she was at work, I gradually moved my essential belongings to the cabin. Each box I packed and transported felt like a step toward freedom. During this time, I noticed Vanessa becoming somewhat kinder, more attentive. Too little, too late. I needed space, mentally and physically. She continued her work events several evenings a week. One night, as she was preparing to leave, I was also getting ready to go out. She looked me over curiously. "Where are you headed?" she asked. "Meeting some friends," I replied casually. "You wouldn't enjoy all the technical talk, and you don't know them anyway." I deliberately echoed the exact phrase she'd used countless times when I'd asked to join her work outings. She continued questioning me, but I cut her off. "Have a good time," she said finally, looking slightly annoyed. "I definitely will," I replied. Working on the cabin and spending time with Jack and his circle of friends provided unexpected healing. I made a conscious decision to moderate my drinking, recognizing how easily grief could lead to destructive habits. Vanessa announced she had a 3-day business trip the following week. When I asked who was attending, she mentioned the executive team and department heads. "Enjoy your time with your boyfriend," I said pointedly. This triggered another heated argument, but I no longer cared enough to engage fully. Jack's advice echoed in my mind. It doesn't matter who the other guy is. What matters is that she chose to step outside your marriage. She broke it, whether she admits it or not. Vanessa's business trip provided the perfect opportunity to complete my exit. I gathered everything of value that belonged solely to me: clothes, electronics, personal items, but left all shared possessions and furniture. Before leaving, I placed a note on the kitchen counter that read simply, "I hope it was worth it." I left my wedding ring on top. Walking away from our apartment for the final time, I felt as if a massive weight had lifted. The pain would take time to process, and there would be emotional baggage to unpack, but I had taken the first step. I needed solitude and a clean break. I hadn't confronted her directly or forced a confession, and I wasn't proud of that. But in my mind, she didn't deserve the closure of a dramatic confrontation. She had discarded everything we'd built: our dreams, our plans for a family, our future. I hadn't consulted a lawyer or made any formal arrangements. All I wanted was clarity and a fresh start. The mountain air greeted me when I arrived at the cabin, crisp, clean, restorative. The following week, I resumed running, rediscovering the joy of physical exertion and the simple pleasure of being alive. While Vanessa was away, she texted updates: "Just landed, team dinner tonight," and so on. When she returned home to find me gone, her messages became frantic. "Where are you?" followed by increasingly urgent texts and calls. Her mother even tried contacting me, but I ignored them all. After a week of silence, her messages grew desperate. "What is this? We need to talk. I don't know what you think you know, but nothing is happening. There's no affair." Finally, after 2 weeks, came a partial confession. "I'm sorry things got so complicated. What happened with a colleague wasn't important. You were gone so often, and I was focused on my career. I made a mistake, and I was going to end it. A mistake." I'd been waiting for this admission, but strangely, it only intensified my contempt. Why couldn't she be honest? I had no desire to reconcile with someone capable of such deceit. Mistakes don't last for months on end. They're momentary lapses, not sustained deceptions. I continued ignoring her messages. After several weeks, her tone shifted. "You're a coward. You won't even talk to me. You don't care about us. Please come home so we can discuss this. Tell me where you are so I can see you. Nathan, please, let's talk and fix this." Her text seemed more focused on self-justification than genuine remorse. Eventually, I changed my phone number, severing that final connection. Months later, Vanessa emailed to inform me she'd hired an attorney and was filing for divorce. I responded with a simple "that sounds appropriate." This triggered another barrage of emails begging me to see her. When she realized I wouldn't budge, she proposed an uncontested divorce. I agreed, and within months, I was legally free. I never had to face her again. For a while, certain triggers, a song we'd loved, a restaurant we'd frequented, would awaken the pain. But gradually, those moments became less frequent, less intense, until thoughts of Vanessa rarely surfaced at all. Life in the mountains suited me. I embraced the simplicity, finding unexpected peace in my solitary existence. I maintained my job, working remotely, and gradually transformed the cabin into a comfortable home. About a year after leaving, I met Emma while hiking a trail near my cabin. She was vibrant and authentic, several years younger but with an old soul. She affectionately calls me her mountain man and appreciates the lifestyle I've created. Though I'm not rushing into commitment, I haven't given up on relationships entirely. The cabin remains my sanctuary, a place where I found healing and rediscovered myself. Everyone processes betrayal differently. I was fortunate to discover this path early in our marriage, before children complicated the picture. I acted in self-preservation, and I have no regrets. If you find yourself in similar circumstances, try not to overthink it. Continue living. Focus on your own growth. It does get better. Recently, I grew concerned that Vanessa might be trying to find me. I had relocated about 2 hours from our old apartment, and last weekend, I spotted her at a coffee shop I frequent in a nearby town. It seemed too coincidental, and I managed to leave before she noticed me. This past weekend, I drove into town for groceries and stopped at my usual cafe to use their internet for some work. As I was leaving, heading toward my truck, I heard someone call out, "Nathan." I turned to see Vanessa waving from across the street. My moment of reckoning had arrived. She rushed toward me, seemingly poised for an embrace, but I instinctively held up my hands to maintain distance. The pain in her expression was unmistakable. "I've been looking for you, Nathan," she said breathlessly. "I've wanted to see you since I found out you moved here. Could we talk?" I felt trapped, cornered. "Fine," I eventually conceded. "Let's find somewhere to sit for a minute." When she suggested coming to my place, I firmly refused. She led me to a bench outside a small shop at the end of the block. She began by commenting on my transformation, admiring my beard, my physique, and how fit I looked from all my outdoor activities. She wore a sundress and had styled her hair exactly how I used to prefer it. Her intentions were transparent. I remained guarded, waiting to see where this conversation would lead. She started with an apology for the affair, claiming karma had exacted its toll. After I left, her workplace became unbearable. Her boss discovered the affair, creating such tension that she resigned. Her lover, who had been engaged, blamed her entirely and was transferred to another division. She retaliated by telling his fiancée everything, ending their engagement. She broke down as she related this, but I remained silent, simply gazing around at passers-by. She composed herself and studied me intently. "What do you want from me?" I finally asked. She claimed the affair wasn't intentional, that corporate politics and power dynamics had drawn her in, that her lover had used his position and charm to manipulate her. She admitted thinking she was using him as much as he was using her. After I confronted her about the affair, she claimed she had planned to come clean. She drank heavily after work to numb her self-loathing. When I disappeared, she felt devastated, abandoned, and heartbroken. She immediately ended things with her lover. She had been searching for me to determine if reconciliation was possible. Despite our divorce, she believed we could start fresh. I stared at her incredulously, then unleashed my pent-up feelings. "You have no right to come here and undo all the healing I've done. Do you think I'd overlook how thoroughly you destroyed our marriage? I told you, if you cheated, we were done. There's no forgiveness here. No second chance. You killed what we had. The moment you chose him, you erased everything between us. How naive do you think I am? I saw you go into that hotel with him. Did you know that?" I noticed my voice rising and pulled back as she grabbed my arm, sobbing against my shoulder. I stepped away. "I deserve this," she said, looking up at me. "I know I do. If nothing else, would you let me take you to dinner? I'd like to keep talking. I want to make sure everything is out in the open. You owe me more time than this, Nathan. Please. I love you so much, even though I know you might not want to hear it. I didn't realize how much until you were gone." She began sobbing uncontrollably, hyperventilating, and I instinctively embraced her, the only way to calm her distress. In that moment, I realized I had broken her heart as thoroughly as she had broken mine. We walked to a quiet spot to continue our conversation. "How did you find me?" I asked once she had calmed down. "Did you hire a detective?" Vanessa explained that she had run into my friend Megan a few weeks earlier and pressed her for information. Megan initially resisted, knowing I didn't want to be found, but Vanessa persisted until Megan revealed that I lived nearby and frequented the town. She had been visiting on her days off, hoping to encounter me. I laughed softly. Megan couldn't keep a secret if her life depended on it. Vanessa blushed. We eventually agreed to have dinner at a charming restaurant with outdoor seating. I deliberately avoided alcohol, not wanting to create any excuse for extending our evening or compromising my judgment. The conversation flowed more easily than expected. As I walked her to her car afterward, she earnestly declared that she hadn't dated anyone since I left and swore I was the only one she wanted. She pressed me to stay longer. "No, it's far too soon for me to consider that path," I told her. When she asked for my phone number, I refused. "You'll just bombard me with texts and calls." Though tearful, she accepted my decision and promised to email me about returning the following weekend. Before she got into her car, I asked pointedly, "Would you have forgiven me if I had been the one who cheated?" She paused thoughtfully. "Yes, eventually, but only with marriage counseling and lots of communication, maybe even some kind of agreement in writing." "I see," I replied noncommittally. "I would wait however long it takes, 5 years, 10 years, she added fervently. Then she took both my hands in hers, looked directly into my eyes, and said, "Damn it, Nathan. I will always love you, and will do anything to prove it." Her declaration caught me off guard. Though I felt more at peace with our interaction, I couldn't envision her as a friend, and her words continued to resonate long after she departed. I returned home, went for an extended run, opened a beer, and reflected on how far I'd come. Could she disrupt the serenity I'd so carefully constructed? This will likely be my last update on this chapter of my life. Last week, Vanessa sent a lengthy email expressing her love and regret for the affair, asking to visit for the weekend. I finally silenced the possibility of reconciliation. In my response, I made it clear that I had no intention of rekindling our relationship. At 33, I'm content with my solitary lifestyle, the simplicity of mountain living, and the freedom to chart my own course. I've enjoyed casual relationships and value my independence. I declined to provide my phone number and wrote, "I no longer know or trust you. You made your choices. I wish you well, and perhaps friendship might be possible someday, but not now." My response angered her. She revealed she'd accepted a position in another state and had hoped I would join her, assuming my remote work would facilitate the move. She wanted us to start fresh somewhere new and had planned to convince me in person before her relocation. Fortunately, I had business travel scheduled for the week she wanted to visit. I'm grateful for the timing. She'll soon be hundreds of miles away, and the physical distance will reinforce the emotional separation I've maintained. She'll eventually recognize that our time together has concluded, though I expect a few more desperate communications before acceptance sets in. She'll find someone new, and perhaps history will repeat itself. To anyone reading this, embrace your life fully. Release what no longer serves you and find the courage to move forward. The path ahead holds possibilities you can't yet imagine.